I was 23 in the fall of 2019, up in a state forest in northern Pennsylvania, because I had a seasonal job checking water gauges and doing basic trail maintenance. Only relevant details: I was alone, my truck was my only way out, and the cabin I stayed in was the kind with one main room and a small bathroom off the back. The cabin sat at the end of a gravel spur road that split off from a longer service road. No neighbors. No cell service unless you drove back up to a bend in the road where you could sometimes get one bar if you held your phone up like an idiot. Inside, it was simple. One metal door with a deadbolt, two windows facing the road, one window facing the woods, and a little propane heater that clicked all night. There was a radio on the counter that the Rangers used, but it wasn't like having 911 in your pocket. It was more like, maybe someone hears you, maybe they don't. That first week felt safe in a boring way. I'd drive out in the morning, take readings, clear branches, be back by late afternoon. I'd make the same easy meals and fall asleep early because there wasn't much else to do. The first weird thing happened on the second night. I was half asleep, hearing the heater pop and settle, when I caught the crunch of gravel outside. Not the soft, random crunch of a deer, the slow, deliberate sound of boots. I sat up, waiting for it to fade back into the trees. It didn't. The crunch moved along the side of the cabin like whoever it was circling it, stopping now and then as if they were listening for movement inside. My brain went straight to Ranger, because Rangers did late checks sometimes, and I'd only been there a week. I told myself I was being dramatic. Still, I stayed in the dark and watched the curtain edges, trying to spot a flashlight beam. The crunch stopped under the window facing the woods. A faint tap hit the glass. Not a knock, more like a fingernail, or the tip of something hard, placed carefully so it wouldn't ring out. I got up without turning on the lights and stepped to the window. All I saw was my own reflection in the dim strip of gravel outside, framed by black tree trunks. No beam, no silhouette, nothing moving. The tapping stopped, and the silence after it was worse. I backed away, checked the deadbolt even though I already knew it was locked, and pulled the radio closer. When I tried to raise anyone, all I got was static. After a while, the gravel sound returned, but it was heading away from the cabin, slow and unhurried, like whoever it was had decided they'd learned what they wanted. By sunrise, it felt stupid. I explained it away as an animal, wind, a ranger, anything that didn't make me feel like someone had been right outside my bed for no reason. The next day stayed normal until I got back in the late afternoon. My truck was parked where I left it, nose in toward the cabin, exactly the same angle. The only difference was the driver's side window. It was down. I sat in the spur road staring at it, trying to convince myself I'd done it by accident. It was cold enough that week that you didn't do that. It wasn't a habit you broke without noticing. The door wasn't open. Nothing looked disturbed. So I did the thing you do when you don't want to admit you're scared. I acted annoyed and walked over like I was checking a simple mistake. The handle was locked. The window was still down. On the seat, right where my thigh would have been, was a scatter of pine needles and grit. Fresh, like someone had brushed themselves off before leaning inside. I didn't get in. My eyes went straight to the tree line, and for the first time since I'd started that job, the woods didn't look like nature. They looked like cover. I went inside, locked the door, and set my keys on the counter like I always did. Except this time I kept them close. I kept the lights on. I laid my pocket knife out too, even though it was just a work knife for rope and plastic packaging. Around 11, I heard gravel again. This time it wasn't circling. It was a straight approach up the spur road, steady and direct, like a person walking right to the door because that was the point. The steps stopped on the porch. The doorknob turned once, like a casual test. Then again, harder, enough that the door shifted in the frame. I backed up until my shoulders hit the wall by the bathroom. The radio was in my hand, but my thumb kept slipping off the talk button because I couldn't keep my grip steady. When I tried raising the Rangers again, a voice finally came through, clipped and confused at first. I rushed out the basics, my location, that someone was at the door, that I was alone. The knob turned again, and I heard metal scrape at the seam, like a tool being set into place carefully. A thump hit the door. Not a shoulder check, more like someone setting a heavy object against it, and leaning their weight into the idea of getting in. Then a flashlight beam slid across the roadside window curtains, low and slow, like whoever it was wanted to see movement without exposing their face. The beam stopped right on the edge of the curtain, hovering there for a few seconds, as if they were waiting for me to flinch or step closer. When the light lifted slightly, it caught the lower part of the glass, and I saw the faint outline of eyes set back from the window, positioned just far enough away to keep themselves hidden. I turned the radio volume up until the cabin filled with static and that ranger voice, loud enough that anyone outside would know I'd made contact. The flashlight beam jerked like the person outside reacted to it. The scraping stopped. The weight against the door shifted away. Footsteps hit the porch steps and moved fast across the gravel. A moment later, an engine started somewhere down the spur road, rough and older sounding, and it pulled off without any hesitation. When the Ranger truck finally showed up, it was two of them, and I was still standing in the same spot with my work knife in my hand, staring at the door like it was going to try something on its own. They swept the area with spotlights and didn't find anyone. The road was already marked up with old prints, and they couldn't get anything clean for tire tracks. But they did find proof. Under the roadside window, pressed into the mud, were boot prints that didn't match mine. Big tread, deep heel, like someone had stood there for more than a second. On the porch, near the hinge side, the paint had a thin, bright line where metal had scraped it, the kind of mark you don't get from wind or animals. One of the rangers stared at that scrape for a long time and then told me, plainly, that I wasn't staying there another night. I finished out the week and quit as soon as I could without making it obvious why. I told people it was a better offer. The truth is, I still think about how quiet that cabin got after the engine left, and how close someone got without ever needing to say a word. Now, if I'm anywhere remote, I don't tough it out. I leave while there's still daylight, and I don't come back alone. I was 19 in the summer of 2016, in rural Ohio, because my friend and I had been night fishing at a little public lake we'd grown up around. Here's what you need to know. The boat ramp parking lot was a dead end, and the only way out was the same narrow road back through the trees. We got there around 10:30 p.m. The place was nothing fancy, just a gravel lot, a ramp, and a sign warning people not to dump trash. No lights, no bathrooms, no houses nearby, and the bugs were loud enough that you could almost forget you were alone. For the first hour, it felt normal. We talked low, checked our lines, watched the water, and listened to small splashes out in the dark. Even the emptiness felt familiar because we'd done it before. Around midnight, headlights appeared through the trees. A car rolled in slow and parked on the far side of the lot, away from the water. It didn't turn off right away. It just idled with the beams aimed toward the ramp, like the driver wanted to see the whole open area without stepping out. My friend acted like it was nothing, like it was just someone checking the lake or turning around. I wanted that to be true, so I leaned into it and kept my attention on my line. The headlights clicked off after a minute, but the car didn't leave. No doors opened. No dome light came on. It sat there in the dark, quiet and patient. 10 minutes later, a cigarette flared inside that car, quick orange, then gone. It was the only sign of a person, which somehow made it worse than if they'd just gotten out and walked around. We kept fishing, but the vibe changed. Every sound felt like it had a purpose. Then gravel shifted behind us. Not from the road, from inside the lot, moving toward the water. The footsteps didn't have a normal rhythm. Whoever it was would take a few steps, pause, then continue, like they were gauging how we reacted. My friend turned on his headlamp and swept it around, and the beam caught a man standing out in the open about 40 feet away. He didn't flinch when the light hit him. He didn't lift a hand to block it. He just stood there, still, staring back like it wasn't bright enough to bother him. My friend made it clear, with his posture and the way he squared up, that we were aware of him and not welcoming company. I did the same thing, trying to look calm, but I could feel my pulse in my throat. The man took a step forward and stopped again, and I noticed he wasn't watching my friend. He kept tracking me. I started winding my line in without looking down. My friend did the same, faster. We moved like we were packing up because it was late, not because a stranger was closing distance in a dark lot. When we started moving toward the truck, the man sped up. He didn't sprint, but he matched our urgency and made it clear he could be at the doors before we were, if we hesitated. We threw gear into the bed, half organized. The tackle box clanked. My hands were shaky enough that I fumbled the keys, and that moment of useless fine motor failure made me feel smaller than anything else. My friend got into the driver's seat first. I yanked my door open and climbed in, and before I could pull it shut, the man reached the door. His hand hit the outside edge and held it there. Up close, he looked normal. Not obviously homeless, not obviously drunk, not obviously anything that would give you a neat explanation. He wore a cap pulled low, and his face was blank in a way that made it hard to read what he wanted. He leaned in just enough that I could smell him, stale smoke and old sweat. He shifted his weight and kept one hand low near his thigh, out of my direct view, and my brain fixated on that like it was a flashing warning sign. He indicated he needed a phone, but it didn't feel like a stranded person situation. It felt like he'd chosen the words that would make us hesitate and look down, because that's what you do when someone asks for something simple. My friend refused immediately, and I kept my attention on the man's hands, not his face. I made it clear we were leaving and that any call for help could happen once we were back on the road with other people around. The man didn't let go. My friend leaned on the horn, long and ugly, the kind of sound that feels embarrassing even when you know it's necessary. The man flinched and glanced back toward the parked car. That's when a second shape moved near it, like someone stepping out from behind the vehicle or shifting position so they could be seen. My stomach dropped. This wasn't one guy wandering around. There were two people, and they'd had a car there before we even showed up. My friend threw the truck into reverse hard enough to spit gravel. The motion jerked the door, and it slammed shut on its own as the man's hand slipped off the edge. We backed up fast, fishtailed, and got onto the narrow exit road with the engine whining higher than it needed to. I kept turning around to look through the rear window, expecting headlights to appear behind us. None did. That didn't make me feel better. It just meant they didn't need to chase us to win whatever they were trying to do. We didn't stop until we hit a gas station 10 minutes away with bright lights and people inside. The normal noise of other customers felt unreal, like I'd stepped into a different world. We called the sheriff from there and gave the details we could, but we didn't have a plate number, and we couldn't give a clean description beyond the basics. The proof came later. 2 days after, a deputy contacted us again and asked if either of us had a dash cam. We didn't, but the county had a trail camera near the entrance road because of illegal dumping complaints. They couldn't give us the footage directly, but they shared the part that mattered. The car we saw had arrived before we did, and it left right after we did, meaning whoever it was had been there first, sitting in the dark, waiting for someone to pull into a dead end. I haven't night fished since, not because fishing is scary, but because I can't unlearn how fast an empty place turns into a trap when the only exit is behind you. I was 27 in early November of 2021 in western Massachusetts because I did on-call maintenance for a small construction company, and I'd been sent to check a generator at an old quarry site. The road in was gated, the site was shut down for the season, and I had to sign in and out with a padlocked drop box at the entrance. It was one of those jobs where the owner makes it sound like a quick favor, the kind that should take 10 minutes. The second I pulled up, I could tell it was going to be longer. I got there just after 6 p.m. It was already dark. The quarry bowl was this huge black open space with gravel piles you couldn't see until your headlights hit them, and the air had that cold, damp smell that makes everything feel sharper. The generator shed sat down a slope, maybe a quarter mile from the gate. It wasn't visible from the road once you were down in the bowl, and the walls of the quarry made the place feel cut off from everything, like sound couldn't escape. The gate was a metal swing gate with a chain and a padlock. Our company had a key. I unlocked it, drove through, and locked it behind me like I was supposed to. That's what made it feel safe at first. In my head, a locked gate meant no one could wander in casually. It meant I was alone, which I preferred on jobs like that. I drove down to the shed, parked, and opened the door to the generator room. The fix started out simple. Battery terminals crusted with corrosion, the kind you can clean and retighten in a few minutes if you have the right brush and a wrench. While I had the shed door open, I heard a sound that didn't fit. A car door closing. It came from up the slope toward the gate. I froze with the wrench in my hand and listened. It was too crisp to be rock shift or wind. It had that hollow thunk that only comes from a vehicle door. I walked out of the shed and shined my flashlight up the access road. The road curved, so I couldn't see the gate from where I was. I could only see my own headlights reflecting off a signpost and a strip of gravel catching the beam. Nothing moved. I tried to talk myself down. I told myself it could have been a truck on the main road outside the gate, a sound carrying weird in the quarry bowl, metal settling, anything that didn't make me turn around and leave. I went back inside and kept working, because that's what you do when you don't want your nerves to be in charge. 5 minutes later, I heard footsteps on gravel, slow and shifting, like someone was testing their footing or moving carefully around a pile. This time it was closer. I stepped out again and killed my flashlight for a second, letting my eyes adjust. A shape moved near the gravel piles, low and hunched, then upright again. Someone was down there with me. I called out toward the darkness to make it known I was there, and to ask why someone was on a closed site. No answer came back. The footsteps stopped, and the silence after it felt intentional. Then my truck's interior dome light blinked on, that little light that only comes on when a door opens. I stared at it like it was a glitch. The truck was 30 feet away, parked with the driver's side facing me. I could see the faint glow through the windshield. A second later, it clicked off. Someone had opened my door and shut it again while I was only a few steps away. My stomach dropped so hard it made me dizzy. I jogged to the truck, yanked the door open, and checked the seat and footwell like I expected to find a person crouched there. No one. But the glove compartment was open. The center console lid was up. It looked like someone had checked what I had, what kind of person I was, whether there was anything worth taking. The fact nothing obvious was missing didn't help. If it wasn't theft, it felt like something worse. Behind me, gravel shifted again, close enough that I could hear individual stones. I spun around and threw my flashlight beam wide across the shed entrance. It caught a man standing by the door, half in shadow. Hood up, hands tucked in his front pocket like he was trying to look casual. He moved like he belonged there, but nothing about him matched a worker. No reflective striping, no tools, no radio, no truck noise up the hill. Just him, standing between the shed and my route back. He asked, with a calm tone, whether I'd locked the gate behind me. It was too specific a question to be casual small talk. I didn't answer it. I shifted the conversation to who he was and how he'd gotten inside. He shrugged and indicated the gate had been open. That was a lie, and we both knew it. I backed toward my truck without turning my body away from him. My keys were in my pocket. My phone had no service down in the bowl, and the quarry walls made the whole place feel like it belonged to whoever decided to take control of it. The man took one step forward, and the beam finally caught what he was holding. A length of chain, coiled in one hand, with a heavy hook on the end like something from a tow strap. My brain did quick, practical math. That chain wasn't a weapon in the obvious way, but it was for grabbing, for pulling, for controlling. It was for making something stay where you wanted it. I got into my truck, locked the doors, and started it. The engine cranked slow for a half second, just long enough to make my chest tighten, and then it turned over. That half second felt like my whole life was balanced on whether the battery decided to cooperate. The man didn't move out of the way. He watched me like he had time. I threw it in drive and aimed toward him, not to hit him, but to force a decision. At the last second, he stepped aside, and I shot up the slope too fast, gravel popping under the tires, suspension bouncing hard enough to make the dashboard rattle. When my headlights hit the gate, I saw the problem immediately. A heavier chain was looped around the bars, doubled, cinched tight. Not our thin chain, something thicker and newer, the kind you'd bring if you planned on using it. Someone had re-secured the gate from the inside, meaning whoever was down there had taken time to make sure I couldn't just leave. I didn't think. I rammed the gate. Not full speed, but enough to jolt the whole truck and make the gate leap on its hinges. The heavy chain went taut with a metallic scream, and the original padlock on our chain snapped at the shackle like it was cheap. The gate swung just enough for me to squeeze through. My mirror clipped the post. I didn't stop to see how bad the damage was. I drove until I hit the first place with bright lights, parked under a gas station canopy, and called the police from there with shaking hands that couldn't quite hold the phone steady. They went out that night and found the gate rechained with that heavier chain, just like I said. They also found my original padlock on the ground inside the site, cracked where it had failed. The proof detail that stuck with me was the gate itself. The heavy chain wasn't something that belonged there. It was something someone brought in, carried down into a closed quarry, and used on purpose. They didn't find the man. They didn't find a car. They didn't find a camp. It was just an empty quarry, a new chain, and the fact that someone had opened my truck while I was close enough to hear the stones under their shoes. I don't do after-dark call-outs anymore unless someone else is going with me. If a job is only 10 minutes, I schedule it for daylight, or it doesn't get done. Anytime I pass a closed gate on a back road now, I don't think it keeps people out. I think about how easy it is for it to keep someone in.